Well, hello there. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you're well and having a beautiful day, whatever you are doing. In today's tutorial, what's a tutorial? Alrighty then. Now, if you can hear lots of ruction in the background, that is my dog playing with some paper bag. I mean, you buy expensive toys and they just find everything else that's boring, and I can hear him ripping that paper bag apart, so I know I've got some work when I'm done. Anyway, so in today's tutorial we'll be talking about 3 ways to bind your quilt, and if you're having problems with your mitered corners, well, in today's tutorial I'm going to hopefully debunk it, make it a lot more simplified for you, and give you 2 other options that I think looks really beautiful instead of always having to do a mitered corner. So I have set some examples within the video for you, but for now, if you're new here, my name is Karen. Please consider subscribing if this tutorial has brought you some value. So before my dog starts making more noise, let's get right into it. I still have that cough. It just won't leave me. It just won't leave me. Let's get started. Jackson, are you going to clean it up once you're done? Why are you ripping it apart? Oi! Oi! I'm talking to you! Jackson! Oh, you heard that, didn't you? For all of my binding demonstrations, I'm going to be doing 3 today. I will be using the same method, so i.e. 2.5 inches and ironed and press open. I have not done a bias joining. I do sometimes I don't. On this particular occasion, I just did a straight joining here, open the seam, press it. All right, so we're going to move on with that today. Alright, so for this one I'm going to be doing the traditional binding. So the traditional binding is whereby you sew on straight, you start with a long tail end. So the tail end here refers to how the distance from the top of the quilt, alright, to the distance as, let's say, halfway or 3/4 down. I usually go about 3/4 down. The reason you're going 3/4 down so that you have enough room to come around that corner. Okay, so you can do that mitered corner. So the traditional quilt binding, I'm going to be doing a mitered corner. So I'm going to start with a long tail end, and I'm referring to the end of my binding. And when I say long, I mean I'm going to give myself some space so that when I come around that corner from doing the mitered corner, I have enough room to fold the quilt so I can join it together. So as I said, I'm going to start about 3/4 down. So I'm just pushing the quilt into or under the sewing machine so that I have that space to do that. So I'm going to leave probably about 12 inches or so from the end, and I'm going to start here. So that's my tail end there. Okay, now normally I start at the back because I like to see the fold at the front, so I like to finish at the front whereby I can see the machine stitch at the front. All right, now some people hand bind. I don't necessarily do that. I've done it once, and I literally mean once, but to me it was so painstakingly long, and notice I said the word painstakingly, that I don't particularly have the patience for it. It looked beautiful, don't get me wrong, it was really nice, and it was for a gift for someone. So after that I promised myself I would never do it again, and I haven't done that since. Now I usually use my 1/4 inch feet. I know some people may use your utility feet. I don't do that. Some people may use I forgot the name of the walking foot. I had to look for it to actually get the memory back. Use the walking foot. I have done in the past. The walking foot is great because all the feed dogs will work in favor of you to really grab the quilt through very quickly. However, what I do, because I am using my 1/4 inch feet, is that I lengthen my stitch length. All right, so my length here at the moment is 2.5, so I'm going to lengthen it to about 4. Now the reason I am lengthening the stitch, so the length is how long the stitch is, the width is how wide the stitch is. So if I'm doing zigzag, then I will have to alter the width of my stitch. In this particular instance, I am just doing the length of the stitch. All right, so that's what I'm changing. So I'm going to start with my long tail end, and as I said before, I like using my 1/4 inch feet. Why? Because it's a 1/4 inch that it gives me to wrap around to start to sew that 1/4 inch, and then I have more than enough to cover the front. Now some people use 2 inches. I like using 2.5. Some people even use less. If you're using binding tape, it's even a little more less in terms of the width of that strip of fabric. The reason why I like the 2.5, I just think I like to see the binding sort of a bit of a particular width once you finish with it. Once you've completed the whole binding, I like to see the binding show up on the quilt, because I like to see that it adds another element of a frame or a final frame around the quilt. That's how I particularly like it. Now I have tried the 2 inches, and I do feel that the fold over is limited. It's a little bit tight, and I don't get that effect as I really like in terms when I use that 2 inches. I don't feel I see much of the quilt. It's just literally covering it. So for me, 2.5 inches is where I feel happy with. You can obviously play around with the width of the strip and see which one you like best, okay? But using a 1/4 inch, it helps me to stay consistent. The seam is nice and straight. What I do is line up the edge of the binding to the edge of my trimmed quilt. Notice I say trimmed quilt, because by this time the quilt is quilted, I've trimmed away all of the excess backing fabric. Okay, and all I'm going to do is simply go all the way around, sewing until I come back to join, and that is where I will come back in and show you how I actually join the 2 strips together. Now, before I move on, the reason I did not mention it for increasing my stitch length is because I want my 1/4 inch feet to glide over my quilt as well as my binding quite easily. I don't want to feel that I have to put any effort into it, i.e. I don't want to feel I have to then put my hand behind here and grab the quilt to pull it through, because what that does is then give your quilt itself a sort of a wavy effect on the edge. It does not sit flat on the table. So to eliminate that force to do that, I lengthen the stitch so that it glides through quite easily, i.e. I don't necessarily need to have a tight stitch there, do I? Number one, as I said before, I like to see the stitches. So if it's too tiny, I can't see it. So if I lengthen it, I can see the stitches on top of the actual finished binding once I fold it over. So for those 2 reasons why I like to lengthen my stitch length. 1, I'll repeat, so that I can see the stitches. 2, so that the quilt and binding move through quite easily, and there is no element of me having to feel I have to drag it through. So that pushes that away, and I always end them with a flat quilt. All right, so I'm going to finish all of this, go all the way around. I'm not going to demonstrate sewing that, because I think once if you've done binding before, you know you definitely have to start. Some people start at the front. I like to start from the back. As I said, I like to see the finished fold on the front of the quilt. So I'm going to continue, then I'll come back and show you the joining. All right, so I'm coming up to one of my corners here for the quilt, as you can see where it cuts across. and it goes down. So that's my first corner there. Okay, so now I'm lining up my my brain went blank. That's too funny. I'm lining up my binding. I just got the giggles for no reason. I line up my binding edge to edge, okay? Now, what you need to do is to come all the way down, and what you're going to literally aiming for is to stop, and I'm going to fold it back. You're going to stop probably about 2 stitches away from the edge of the corner there. If I can get my pointy tool rather than use my finger. Right, so you just want to get 2 stitches from the end there. The reason I'm saying that is so that you can turn the corner. Think about it as a car coming up to a junction and you're going to be turning left. You don't just go around, isn't it? You don't just bend, because you have to stop, give way, realign the car properly, and then so you can turn into that corner quite safely. So I'm going to come all the way down. I'm going to line up again and come all the way down. Now I like to put it down nice and firm on the quilt, and then come straight down. So I'm going to come down. Now when you get closer to it, just take your time and go slow. You don't have to go fast, okay? Now usually I average it. If, for example, I would raise my presser foot and just raise the needle a little bit, and I'm going to swing the quilt now towards me. Right, so the quilt is now towards me, it's straight again, and sometimes I would just use my finger, hold it like so, use my index finger, and then twist it around, because I want to get this sort of 90-degree angle there. Do you see that? I'm going to try and zoom in a little bit more. Right, you can pull it out. All right, I don't break thread, I leave it, and I will just grab it like that together, just to give myself that angle. Do you see that there? That's what I'm looking for. All right, then once I have that, I will just put it lie down right to the top, making sure it's leveled. Okay, once it's level, then I put it down like so. But let me show you this. I want to bring it closer so you can see now there is a little bit of the quilt sticking out there. All right, remember I said to you sometimes I am not paying attention, I might just stop, and it's a little bit away from the edge. Now give it, I can just use it like that, but what I do find is that you do get that little bulk in the corner there. So what I'm going to do is just go back under. I'm going to turn the quilt yet again back the way it was, so I'm going to straighten it up. I'm just going to zoom out so you can see that. Straighten up the quilt, and I'm just going to pull my thread through, because remember I pulled it, put all the excess thread behind me, realign myself where I was, and I'm just going to take probably another 2 stitches. Remember I said I want to stop 2 stitches away from the end. So in this case I wouldn't use the presser foot, I will just turn the wheel. I will just turn the wheel, because the wheel will still do the same thing, isn't it? I'm turning the wheel of the machine. All right, and I can just lift it up and check, and if I think I'm not there, do one more. Okay, I think I'm fine now. That should do. So I've done like 3 stitches. Okay, and I'm going to raise the feet again, this time again, and twist it, lifting the quilt, bring it round towards me, and again align the binding. But notice where my finger is. See where my finger is? Immediately, without even thinking, my index finger went underneath there and my middle finger went there to hold the quilt. So as I'm turning, I automatically lift it like so, and I've automatically gotten that mitered, or that 90-degree there, ready for my mitered corner. All right, I'm going to take it out just so that we can do it properly, and I'm going to zoom back in again. All right, so this time pick up your binding I am going to, I don't want to put my hands in the way, hold it like so, making that 90 degree. Okay, once I have that 90 degree, I'm just going to put it right to the top so that it's leveled off. Just trying to get in the camera so that it's leveled off. Once it's leveled off, I'm just going to straighten back up things again. And all I'm going to do is to go back into and go right back down. Okay, so there I am. I'm going to take it out, go back, line up my machine again the same way, because, and this is why I use a 1/4 inch feet, because it lines it up automatically for me. And I'll just line it up to the edge with the 1/4 inch feet, get to the top, then make sure it's nice and straight where I would start automatically normally. And then all I need to do now is hold it down and continue to sew. Okay, so that's how you get the start of your mitered corner. All right, and I'm just gonna continue going all the way down. And because I aligned myself properly at the top up there, I now can really line up properly. Because if I didn't, remember initially I was about a 1/4 inch away from the edge of my quilt. So now that, so then what would have happened if I continued with that? I still would have been a 1/4 inch away, because then I would have to force it back that way. But because I've automatically lined up, it fits in there nicely. All right, hopefully you get what I'm saying. And I'm just going to continue all the way down as normal until I get to my next corner and do the exact same thing. So when I get to the next corner, I'll jump back on and do the exact same demonstration. This time I will not take it out of the machine. I will just use my finger as I usually do. Alright, so I'm away from the edge because it didn't sew, because I obviously ran out of bobbin thread. So I'm going to realign again. I'm going to try and use a pointy tool rather than use my hand so I don't block the camera. And line up, machine down. I notice I'm taking my time. I'm not, gunning it all the way down. I'm just doing a couple of stitches. As I said, you can turn the machine wheel on the right hand side of the machine. And I think I'm there actually. So what I'm going to do is lift it. So what I usually do, as I said, as I'm lift, I use my finger and lift it up. So grab it with my index finger, line it up. And I still get that 90 degree there, okay? And then it will automatically, if I want to double check, then obviously I'll take it out, but it automatically lines up at the top. I hold it down just like I would before and come straight down. And let me just cut it and show you. And I still get that 90 degree there. All right, so hopefully I show that to you. I'll just come back again. So it's there, that 90 degrees. So I can flip, it's right at the top. So all I'm going to do now is realign and continue, and then I will come back and show you about joining. Right, so I've reached the edge now of where I left my tail end on this side of the quilt. So now this is the one I've been sewing with, and this is my starter tail end here. Now what I need to do is to join this together. Now you can do two things. You can just simply put it down together. I usually extend the quilt out. I usually extend the quilt out like so. So I'll stretch it out. This is my tail end here that I started with. This is the one I'm sewing with. So I'll get my tail end up, align it, make sure the quilt is nice and taut. Once it's nice and taut, I can then bring it the extra on top. All right. Now, as I said, you can do one of two things. You can just butt it up together. Ideally, that is what I usually do. So when I say butt it up, I would literally cut it a 1/4 inch away. So I just put it flat like that, as I said, on the quilt. I do everything on the machine. I don't get up and go to the table. I just do everything right there. And I can average a 1/4 inch. So then I will average a 1/4 inch, and then I will mark it. So I'll just, for example, I'll mark it there. I'll get a pen and I will mark it, and I will cut it. Okay, so the 1/4 inch will already be on this end because I'm measuring a 1/4 inch on the tail end here, and I've already folded my 1/4 inch here where I want it to meet, so I know it will overlap. So then I will cut it, and then I will excuse me, then I would obviously fold it back, and I'm just going to pretend here for a minute because I want to demonstrate another. Okay, fold it back like so, and then I will butt these two ends up together. Normally that's what I do. Okay, and now I do this. I'm not entering my quilts as not entering competition. If I'm entering a quilt competition, I will not do that. I will bind it properly. Okay, so the average person, when they buy a quilt, they're not checking to see if the binding has been done with a mitered corner. Now there's nothing wrong in doing it this way. It just simply means that when you do once you do this, sorry, you need to make sure that you open that seam and press it flat so that you can eliminate some of the bulk, and we do the binding so that the bulk is distributed. When you do it in this butt to butt ends, what I call it, yeah, you have that fold right there with all those seams on that fold, so it's a bit of it's chunky. It causes no harm. It doesn't look any way, shape or form ugly or anything like that. When you do a mitered, then what happens, let's imagine this is your mitered cut, you then have the seam line distributed at an angle, so you don't get that bulk in one area. Okay, now to do the other method, to do that mitered cut, sorry, what you need to do is the same thing. I will do the exact same thing. I would lay it out like so, and then put that one on top of it. But what I will do in this case is get a measuring tool, and I would measure 2.5 inches. I would measure 2.5 inches from the end here over. So from the end of my tail end, yeah, 2.5 inches. I'll get my ruler, line it up to the end, 2.5, and I will just cut it right here. Okay, so I'm going to snip that. So I've measured my 2.5 inches. So I have my extra here now to put away. I still got my tail end here. So what I've actually cut is the bit that I have been using to sew all the way around. All right, that other tail end. All right, so what I'm going to do now is open them up. So I'm going to do front sides together, just like you would, but for this reason I need to take it out from the sewing machine because I can't do it like that. Hence the reason why you give yourself this big gap here so that you can fold it. So I'm going to take it off. In fact, I'm going to cut thread. Okay, and I'm going to fold the quilt. The reason why I'm folding the quilt is so that I have enough space to literally do the binding properly. That's all it's about, really. It's just getting that binding done properly. That's so you have the space. So again, doing it front sides together, and this one here. me just get that open. So I'm going to do the one I was sewing with down, okay, and my tail end on top. So front sides together like so. And just let it stick out probably about a 1/4 inch at the end there, and about a 1/4 inch at the top, which is already done. Hopefully you can make it out. All right, and all I'm going to do really is just sew across it. That's all I am going to do. So I'm just going to sew now. Let me pin it because it's been a poo head. As I like to say to my dog, you've been a poo head. So I'm just going to pin it in place just so that it stays and it's not constantly moving. Right, so as it is now, it's fine. I mean, if you want, you can get a pin and just pin the quilt so that it stays. In all honesty, I don't do all of this. I'm just demonstrating this to you as an example. I don't do that. I will literally just do it. When you get used to something, you find really quicker ways of doing it. All right, so now that the two binding strips is together, so I'm going to sew from there to there at the end of this corner here. So you can draw a line if you so desire. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to line it up and sew all the way across there. So again, take your time. And it can be fiddly. That's, you know, I think that's one of the reasons why I tend to sometimes just butt it up together and sew. I'm just going to sew across. I remove that pin so I don't break my needle. That's it. Done. Cut the thread. Now what you can do before you cut it, if you don't trust yourself, is to just check it. Alright, so what I'm going to do is open it up, and I can see that's fine, perfectly fine. So you see how it lays flat on there nicely, and remember I talked about that distributed stitch line. So because it's sewn at an angle, now it is distributed. So I have some on this side and some on that side, and it's at a slant. So hopefully you can see the seam line, okay, which is right there. All right, so what I'm going to do now is, now that I'm happy that it sits flat on the actual quilt, I'm just going to trim off this extra because I don't need it now. And all I'm going to do now is just line it back down, just making sure I haven't unthread my needle, and line it back up and just continue to sew on the binding. And then once we've done that, we're going to turn it around and I'm going to show you how to do the front. So that's simply it. I hope that helps and it makes sense. Alright, so I've reached to the end and the binding at the back is on now. So I'm literally at the front of the quilt. I've turned it over. Now, once you've turned it over, obviously the front of the quilt should be facing you, and you've got your binding again facing you as well. So it should look like so on yours. Now, remember when I spoke about having that excess and more than enough to fold it over? So that's what I was referring to. I do find that if you use a 2-inch, I do find that you don't have very much to fold over. It's quite small. All right, so hence the reason why I liked using 2.5. Now you can start at any particular point in the quilt to finish the binding on the front, but I'm going to start nearer towards the end so I can show you how to do that mitered corner. So I'm just going to fold it over, and again I'm using my 1/4 inch feet because the objective here is to use the binding to cover that line of thread, that you'll have a straight line because of your binding you did at the back. All right, so you're going to fold it over and make sure you are covering. I like to go either on it or just slightly ahead of that, and any extra thread I usually kind of just shove it in there and fold it over. Depending how long the thread is, I might just cut it off. All right, And then I'm going to line up. Now when I'm lining up with my 1/4 inch, I usually aim to have the edge of my 1/4 inch feet. I'm going to zoom in yet again. So I'm aiming to have the edge here right on the edge of the binding, like so. And now, so what that will do is give me a little bit of a gap. So that edge there of my 1/4 inch toe there is going to be, that's the width that's going there where the stitch is going to be. So it's going to be from the edge of the binding, it's going to be a little bit of a width there. That's fine. If I want to go closer, then what I will do sometimes, it really depends on my mood, to be honest. Okay, so I raise my feet and I will just go literally on the, I don't want to unthread, on the end there. So now the feet is actually hanging off. Hopefully you can see it and go that way. It's actually hanging off. All right, so I'm going to line up again. It doesn't really matter whatever you choose. The most important thing is that you cover that previous stitch line, and when you cover that previous stitch line, it's very likely that you're going to line up at the back correctly as well. Okay, so just right on that edge of that previous stitch line is where I line it up, and once I am happy where I've lined up my 1/4 inch feet, that's where I start to sew. And then I go straight down. So again, keep it nice and straight. So what I do is just make sure it's covering that previous stitch line there. Line it up, hold it, come straight down. That is simply it. Keep going. In case you're wondering what I stopped just now, is because my finger accidentally switched off an important part on the machine. This machine is so sensitive. A slight touch and it switches something. So normally my stitches will be on repeat, so it was just on a singular, so it was just giving me one stitch. That's what I thought, oh, what's going on here? When I checked, my finger touched it. I did hear it kind of beep, but I kind of ignored it. So again, flip it over just to cover that previous stitch line, come all the way down. We're coming up now close to where the corner is. Again, lining it up. And when I'm getting closer, I like to flip it over. So let me continue so I get down a little bit more so you get the idea. So as I'm getting closer, what I will do is use my thumb and just flip it over and flip it back, poke it out like so. Just make sure that's nicely poked out there, and then align it again. And I like to line it up flat, so it must come flat all the way down. All right, again making sure I'm on that stitch line. And I'm going to go right towards the end, probably about 2 stitches away from the edge of my previous line here, or I should call it the quilt, all the way down. Again, you can use your wheel to turn. One more, and I'm going to lift my presser foot, turn the quilt yet again. And you can do 2 things. You can use I'm looking for my pointy toe. I don't know what I've done with it now. Oh, brilliant. Brilliant. I've lost it. Did I put it back? No, I haven't put it back. Alright, so I'm going to use my needle here, my pin here as an example. So usually I don't lift it up. I will just lift up the feet, like tuck it, or I can use it under. But for demonstration purposes, I am just going to lift it out properly and show you. It's going to drag it out, which is important. Okay, flatten it down, and all you're going to do really, okay, I'm going to be I have to find that tool, otherwise my fingers, my big old hand is going to be in the camera shot. Give me a second. Alright, so armed with my pointy tool now, what I'm going to do is just lift it, fold it over, because we want to make sure that we now have that 45-degree. Fold it over, just to make sure you get that nice mitered corner. Make sure everything lines up properly. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to have to cut the thread. I don't usually like breaking thread at this point, because I do find it just leaves all those extra thread sticking out. Alright, so you fold it down like so. Make sure it's lovely and flat. You fold it over with your finger, because you want to get that nice 45-degree. Tuck it under, and I'm going to zoom in so you can actually see that properly. And what you can do is use a pin, if that helps, to mark it. Right, let me zoom in. Alright, so I'm going to try zoom out, because I don't think zoom in helps. It gets too blurry. Okay, so yeah, this is where we stopped. Alright, so I'm going to fold it over with my finger, making sure the whole length of it turns down. And I'm just going to pinch it at the top there. And once I pinch it, I automatically get that mitered corner. It's just a really nice, tight, neat fold that you're looking for. I'm going to have to come in the light, because I do feel that my hand is blocking. So stretch it out, fold it over, and once you get that corner, that really corner tucked in nicely, you just really need to put it back under the sewing machine, under the needle I should say. Find that spot, and you're going to go right into it. Let the machine hold it in place for you, and as you know it's held in place, you just continue to sew again. So I'm going to get to the next corner and I will do it again. If not, I'm going to have to take it out and put it on the table so that you see the fold properly. Alright, so we've come to the end of the next corner now. So again, I'm just going to flip it out with my finger, because that's what I do. Now let me give you this tip. Now if you do find that for some reason you come to the end and you find it's a bit bulky, what you can do is just give it a little trim. Just trim it off, and it should feel alright. Yeah, if you can do that. Just give it a little bit of a snip so that it tucks in there nicely. So again, I'm going to line up. I'm going to come straight off of that corner. And I'm going to hold it and sew all the way down. I'm going to keep going. Notice how I've slowed down the machine so I can control it. And I am very close to my pointy tool, so I'm just going to do one more. Okay, so once I get there, I'm just going to turn it now. I'm going to take it out for your purpose, because normally I would just flip it around. I'm going to bring it out, and all I'm going to do is just fold it over to get that corner. So once I fold it over, again, I want the corner to sit right on top of that previous binding line there. Okay, that binding edge, I want the corner to sit. I don't want the corner to sit on the quilt like that. Yeah, I don't want the corner on the quilt like that. So I want it literally in the corner of where the line of the stitch line is. I should say where the stitch line is. So once you see that stitch line, you're literally going to put it back right there. So you have that nice turn of fold for that mitered corner. I'm just going to put it back underneath. And again, if you want to use your pin and just lift it up and get it into position, you can. Put it down. Once the needle for the machine is in there, then you can let it go. And you just continue again. All the way around. And it automatically lines up for you nice and easy. And you just continue. Keep going all the way down until you've done all 4 corners and you have completed. Alright, so the next stage is to make the curved binding. So the curved binding is whereby if you are having difficulty doing the mitered corners on the corner of the quilts, okay, as I just demonstrated, the next step or the next option is that you can do a curved binding. Now I do like the curved binding. It's something different on your quilts, and it's, you know, it just makes a difference there for an added extra beauty on the quilt. Now I have a curve ruler here, okay, just a little one, and if you can use any sort of a bowl plate, something round to the edges to give you the measurement that you want. So I'm just going to literally take off a corner here. Now I'm demonstrating, I'm making some table mats because I tend to do that quite regularly if I've got big prints like this. So I would do for that particular purpose. I've just got a plain fabric on the back, and on the front it's just this big beautiful print that I just turn into 4 table mats. So this is number 1 of the 4 table mats. So all I'm going to do is basically just do a light little curve at the corner there, and I'm going to use my ruler, my curve ruler. As I said, you can use any sort of curve you want. The objective here is to make the same measurements from the corner to the whatever you want. So let's say, for example, you are aiming at, say, 3 inches. You would mark 3 inches. Let's get my ruler. So then I will mark 3 inches there, and you will do this for a large quilt. Yeah, the method of the use does not change. All right, so I'll just do 3 inches. You can make the curve how big you want, again, which is really nice added effect if you want to. So I'll put a dot there and a dot there, and what I'm going to do basically is just use my ruler and just do a nice curve, and I'm going to draw a line. I'm going to draw it so I know exactly where I'm cutting. Okay, now I can either go ahead and mark the edges for all of them, but I'm not going to do that. What I am going to do though is to fold it this way, front sides together, because my little table mat here, is already measured. I've trimmed the edges after quilting it. So what I'm going to do now is just take my scissors and just simply cut it. So then I will have the same cut for each side, and it will be even. So all I'm going to do now is to simply take one of these, add it on here, just like so. I mean, you just got to make this as simplistic and basic as you possibly can. You can either mark it again, or you can just simply hold it and trim it. All right, but I'm going to mark it again because I think that makes sense to just simply mark it again. So literally it's the same cut, so it looks the same. We're looking here to make it equal, and just simply follow the line. Okay, and you've got simply curved edges. See that, how beautiful that looks? So you can do that for your quilts. It doesn't have, there's no right or wrong to say that your edges has got to have that mitered corner. And when you put your binding on, you would just go all the way around as normal. Simple as that. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is to just finish off all of the others. I've got them all here. So I've got 4 in total. They look pretty beautiful. I love these big prints. and just measure them all the same size or the same cut. I can just simply again put it on there and just cut it off. All right, so I'm going to just do this, put the binding on, and then I'll come back and show you what it looks like. Okay, so I wanted now to verbally explain a little bit before I show you the small brief snippet that I have for the self-binding. Now, the self-binding for me is just simply using the excess backing of the fabric to wrap around and make the binding. In the video, you're going to see me just sewing it basically, but I just wanted to give you a brief explanation. So in this particular video, it's called Squaring Up, and I will link the video in the description box for you so you can go and look at that full tutorial. So what I literally did was use the excess backing, because you know when you've quilted your quilt, etc., and you have the excess backing all the way around the quilt, all the four edges of the quilt. So rather than cut it to, say, the edges of the quilt, what I did is left 2 inches. Why 2 inches? Well, it's already stitched on, isn't it? All right, so I left two inches around the perimeter of the quilt. So I cut it accurately. So I obviously measured from 2 inches from the edge of the quilt top to the rest on the backing fabric, and I just trimmed up 2 inches. So when I trimmed away, there was 2 inches of backing fabric left all the way around, hence eliminating the process of having to now go cut and make binding. All right, and so I felt this was a very easier way of doing binding, especially if you like the backing. Okay, because I know many times for myself, I would use the same backing before I started doing this. Excuse me. I would use the same backing to make my binding. All right, so I thought in this particular video, you know, I was trying to make a quilt very quickly, and I thought that was another shortcut I can improvise in. So trimmed it up to 2 inches and just folded 2 folds to cover the edge and sewed around it as normal. In this particular instance, you will get a mitered corner once you do, because the same thing applies, isn't it? The same method applies when you're doing that mitered corner. You just don't have to do a bias joining because it's already there, and you don't have to literally go and cut any more fabric to make your binding. So let's go watch the video now. Okay guys, so I just wanted to quickly jump in and show you what I'm doing now before I show you the completed quilt. So I am presently just sewing the binding on. And all I'm simply doing is just taking the extra that I left, so the 1 inch that I left, and folding it over to create the binding there. Now I've done a little bit here already, and I just wanted to have a little show you what it looks like. So you can see there's no main difference. The only thing here is I'm saving myself a little bit of labor in the sense that I don't have to cut for binding, fold it, iron, etc., and then stitch it on. I'm just using the fabric. So in essence, creating a self-binding quilt. But I just wanted to jump in and show you, you know, it's coming together very quickly, and it's an easy peasy one using these shortcuts if you're in a rush to get a quilt done quite fast.